Today. Welcome to the January 11th Planning Commission meeting. I'll ask John Bridger to cover the procedural rules per the governor's executive order on virtual meetings. John.
Thank you, Chair. In response to the governor's executive order for conducting virtual meetings, this meeting is being recorded and is also streaming live on RPA's YouTube channel if you prefer to view it that way. You can see the chat box. Emily will provide a link if you need it to watch it on YouTube. As part of the executive order, any votes or actions taken by this board has to be by roll call, including the roll call establishing the quorum.
And Mr. Bridger, if you'll do a roll call to make sure we have a quorum, please.
Thank you. Just notify by being here by saying aye. Ledford?
Yes.
Coker?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Verone? You're still muted, Adam. There you go. Still can't hear you, but I see you. Thumbs up.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Very good.
Thank you, sir. Bailey?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Did I miss anybody else who's joined us?
Greg
I see
Martin.
Commissioner Martin. Thank you, Martin. Commissioner Martin. All right, we have a quorum, sir.
I need to say I'm here.
And Todd Lehman. Yes, you're here as well. That's
Okay, as a reminder, all attendees registered prior to today's meeting to speak. That information was provided to applicants and public stakeholders as part of the RPA's notification procedures, is also posted on the RPA website. If you have not pre-registered, you can still email your comments on the zoning cases to, and I believe Ms. Wood's going to put that on our chat, rezoning@chattanooga.gov, and the RPA staff will forward any email comments today to the appropriate local legislation body for their review before final action is taken in the next couple of weeks. Okay, now is it my opening remarks, John?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, I will note, as part of these remarks, I will note our typical procedure for review of each case item, but highlight some of the differences due to the virtual meeting format. Planning commissioners have received the staff reports for the cases on today's agenda and have had time to review the case information prior to this meeting. We will use the following procedure for the cases. For each case with a recommendation to approve or approve with conditions, I will ask the staff if anyone has notified staff they would like to speak in opposition to the case or to the conditions. If there is no one, unless a PC member requests a staff presentation, we will proceed to a roll call vote. I will say that we'll allow the applicant relative to the conditions to speak if need be. For staff recommendations to deny or for cases with registered speakers, we will start with a staff presentation. Following the staff presentation, if there are no questions from the Planning Commission members, I will ask for the applicant to be recognized. A staff person will move the registered speaker into this form with the Planning Commission, unmuting them and allowing them to speak. If for some reason your name is called and staff does not unmute you, please immediately indicate in the chat box that you are present. The applicant will have 7 minutes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
We are no longer using the chat box, so they'll need to raise their virtual hand.
Thank you, Emily. The applicant will have 7 minutes to present their request. Please note that there will be a time clock displayed on the screen that will help keep track of your remaining time. And if there's not a screen, Mr. Schultz will jump in relative to that time. We will try to, as best we can, limit the time that opposition and the applicant speaks. So 7 minutes initially for the applicant in those cases. If there is any opposition and that opposition is registered to speak, then they will have a total of 9 minutes. I will mention that if there are multiple speakers, which I believe there's one case we have multiple speakers in opposition, I may step in to ask them to wrap up their remarks so that others may speak. And then the applicant will have 2 minutes to respond. When you're speaking, both as an applicant or as in opposition, please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the audience or the applicant. Once Planning Commission takes action, if you have any questions, please put your question and your email and contact information in the chat box, and a staff member will follow up with you in the next several days. Note that for most requests other than subdivisions, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation, and final action on a request is taken to the local council or commission the following month, allowing another opportunity for your input. Staff will post the next meeting dates on those cases in the chat box. And we'll go ahead with that and move into our agenda. Our first item is under subdivisions, plats, and variances. There are variances. We'll start with case SD 2021-0003, which is located at 7514 Austin Drive. It's a variance for minimum lot size. In the Chattanooga zoning regulations, there's a staff recommendation to approve.
Yes, can everybody see my screen?
Was there any opposition?
Mr. Chair, no one has registered to speak in opposition, but the Planning Commission did receive written comments from 3 individuals, Chris Edwards, Jason Edwards, and Rodney Edwards.
And Mr. Chairman, I can go through those comments real quick if you would like, and the reason behind the staff recommendation.
Well, I'm assuming, did the majority of the planning commissioners get this list?
Yes.
Okay. I'll either entertain a request to hear additional information on the opposition emails, or either a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Martin.
Commissioner Martin, Farmer, actually.
Farmer.
Farmer, and who was the second?
Ledford.
Okay, Councilman Ledford was the second. Any discussion on the motion to approve? All those in favor, please say aye by roll call.
Ledford,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Barone. Barone,
Chair, yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Moving on to item number 2 under variances is case SD 2021-0004, which is located at 1722 and 1724 Gray Road. The variance for suburban infill lot frontage in the Chattanooga zoning regulations. I did not see any opposition through emails. Is that correct?
That is
That is
correct.
correct.
Okay, but there's a recommendation from staff to deny. So if you would, Mr. Schultz, do staff recommendation, and then Emily, if you want to bring in the applicant.
Okay. This is a request to subdivide 1722 and 1724 Gray Road from 2 lots into 3 lots. It's zoned R1. The minimum lot frontage is in the suburban infill lot frontage requirements, which says the minimum lot frontage is the smallest lot within 300 feet of the property being subdivided. So when you look at those properties, the smallest lot within 300 feet is 101 feet. This applicant is proposing 66 feet. Is my slide changing?
Yes.
Okay, this is the property here highlighted in red. These are the 2 properties here, 1722 and 1724. If you zoom in a little closer, those are the 2 properties, 1722 and 1724. If you look at the eastern side of Gray Road, all the lot frontages are 101 feet, including the 2 existing lots that are requested to be subdivided. If you look to the west of Gray Road, those are much larger. Those lot frontages are around 227 feet. So if you look within 300 feet of these 2 properties, which is highlighted in the red circle, the smallest lot frontage is 101 feet. So that's the minimum lot frontage that's required. So staff recommend to deny this request. Approving the variance would be in conflict with the intent and purpose of the regulations, of the Chattanooga subdivision regulations. within 300 feet on the same side of 1722 and 1724 Gray Road. The lot frontages are 101 feet. Across the street, as I stated earlier, they're 227 feet. Approving the variance would create a situation or lot frontages that does not currently exist or would be incompatible in terms of lot frontage along Gray Road. If approved, at 66 feet of lot frontage, further request could occur along Gray Road, and this 66 foot would become the smallest lot frontage along Gray Road, which again would in turn lead to more requests along Gray Road. So with that, staff recommended to deny the request. The applicant did send pictures on Friday of the property. This property was destroyed during the tornado in April of Easter. So they just sent pictures in to show you what that looks like. I'll go through those really quickly. There were 2 existing homes on this property. As you can see, they were destroyed by the April tornadoes. So at the end of the day, the applicant's trying to do a request to take 2 existing lots and create 3. And as part of that request, there's a need for a lot frontage variance, and staff recommends to deny.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions for staff?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Councilman.
So this is in District 4, as many of you know, is my district, and very, very familiar with what is going on Gray Road and along the tornado path. So my question is, and I will be making a motion, so if you'll allow me to do that when the time is right. But Brian, my question is, the lot width is still 66 feet, which falls in with normal R1, correct?
Yes, the normal outside or inside the urban overlay, which is basically downtown, R1 requirements are 60 feet of frontage.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Outside the urban overlay, this is where you fall into suburban infill.
So a 10-foot setback will still be applicable here for any structures that are built if the variance were to be granted, correct?
That's correct. It does not change any of the setbacks.
Okay, that's good. That checks that. The second part is you guys have a difficult job sometimes because I know that you have to do the recommendations based on what is written. And how far back, Brian, does this plan go? I'm thinking, if my research is right, we're reaching back into the early 60s, maybe even with the recommendations for this area.
What do you mean by the 60s on the recommendation?
What plan are we using to make that determination?
No, it's not a plan. It's in the zoning, the R1 zoning. I guess that was in 2007, 2008. The zoning code was amended to require in the R1 zone, if you're outside the urban overlay, you fall within this suburban infill lot frontage requirement. Basically, we were having problems with a lot of flag lots, 25 feet wide along Graysville Road.
Okay.
And Planning Commission at the time, even City Council at that time, recommended staff change, do away with flag lots and go this direction, which is trying to create lots that are compatible with streets, just like you're seeing on the screen today. But that was in 2006, 2007. Okay.
That I might be thinking of something different when it comes to the previous date. In addressing flag lots, have we seen any activity or request? I mean, has that been completely eliminated? Is that off the menu for us?
Flag lots in the city, yes, that should get a variance, but I don't know that we've ever gone as small as 25 feet on flag lots since this suburban rule has been in effect.
Okay, very good. That helps me tremendously. When it's time to make the motion, I will yield the floor to see if anybody else has a question and or the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from members? Okay, Emily, if you'll bring in the applicant.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'm going to unmute your microphone. Brandon, sorry if I don't pronounce your name, Pangendenban. I'm going to unmute your microphone and allow you to talk.
Sir, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you. Yeah, just a reminder, you've got 7 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Just want to give you a quick synopsis. I reside on this property. My home, as well as the adjacent homes, were total losses. In the aftermath, although I was able to pull these people out of the rubble and they survived, they did not have the physical capabilities to deal with the cleanup. So after having cleaned up these properties, they elected to move on, to not deal with the painful rebuilding process, and have entrusted me with their land to try to rebuild this in the character of the neighborhood and do something that's in the best interest of myself, which I'll be continuing to live there, and all of our neighbors. We have a close-knit community there in the middle of Gray Road. So we're trying to do is figure out something that will fit with the fact that these homes were built in the 50s when everything was a dirt road, and people were building 1,000 square foot houses on acre plus lots. Obviously, the dynamic has changed in 70 years, and there's the lots and homes just look different in East Brainerd. So we're trying to align something that will be financeable for families coming in that will be looking to buy these homes that will best align with options that can give us a path forward to rebuild and put this behind us. So for myself, which I'll be still living there, and Ed, John, Ken, all of our neighbors around who have also grown. With that, I'm gonna hand this over to Evan, who's been helping me get through the rebuild process and is representing me.
Do I need to let Evan in?
Yes, he's
okay.
Yes, we're working remotely for distancing purposes, so you'll have to let him in.
Okay.
Ron, how much?
Evan, you should be allowed to speak.
We have 5 minutes, about 5 minutes left.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak this afternoon. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Brandon Panganiban to discuss this variance. As you know, many homeowners and families were impacted by the tornadoes. I know we've seen some pictures that have been up on the screen, regarding Mr. Panganiban's properties on Gray Road. We're here today to ask for a variance, and because we'd like to subdivide these 2 lots into a third one, get 3 existing lots with about road frontage of about 66 to 67 feet. Understandably, there is that minimum requirement that requires you to have the lot frontage within 300 feet of the property. However, if you really, if you go a little bit further than 300 feet from the property, you'll notice that, just a few roads over, there are existing properties with, lower than 100-foot road frontages. And that's kind of what we're hoping to bring to, to this property here. Mr. Panganiban is not looking to turn East Brainerd into Highland Park or, heaven forbid, East Nashville. He's not looking to build tall skinnies on his property. He's just wanting to rebuild some homes that are consistent with the existing neighborhood. Single family homes that won't drastically increase the traffic flow in and out of the neighborhood. And, the way we see it, this variance could actually be beneficial for both the city and Mr. Panganiban. The county and the city will draw increased property tax revenue from allowing this third lot to be created and a property to be built upon there without, greatly increasing the property or greatly increasing the cost of service to that area. And Mr. Panganiban can, really make the best out of a terrible situation that he was put in through no fault of his own. I mean, there's this tornado that ripped through here, and he just wants to put this behind him and move forward. And it's our opinion, that this variance should be granted due to the existence of comparable road frontages within the neighborhood, maybe not within 300 feet, but definitely within the area. And, just granting this variance will not greatly alter the neighborhood aesthetics because Mr. Panganiban's planning on putting properties that are conducive to, the Gray Road area and East Brainerd. He's not looking to change the face of the neighborhood. He's just seeking this variance to help them make the best out of a bad situation. So, with that, we'll kind of turn it over and to the committee for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the applicant from any members?
I do, Todd. Chairman.
Yes, Councilman, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Mr. Pangan, yeah, tell me.
Brandon's fine. I don't think pronouncing Panganiban's a reasonable request.
I'm going to go with Brandon right now. Hey,
Sounds
Brandon, are you okay with, I can see where staff concerns came along. Were you okay with maybe putting a square footage minimum of like 2,400 to keep in kind of the context or keep in similarity with houses in that area? Are you okay with that as a condition?
Yes, absolutely. The Ken and Pat on one side and Steve and Cindy on the other side of these lots, they've grown as well over the decades here. So we're looking in the over 2,000 square foot range in order to match everybody else's house and keep up with the character of the neighborhood. So that would be fine. That's the direction we were headed anyway.
Okay, fantastic. So that was really my only concern. I wanted to say something before I make a motion. And Brian, I do want to add that as a condition.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I don't know. Maybe John can jump in. I don't know that we can add, or Planning Commission can add a minimum
Oh,
housing
on a
square
variance.
footage.
On a variance. Okay,
On a
you know
variance.
what? That's not a problem for me at all.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question, Brian. Is he held to the schematic he did? I mean, it looks like he's taken down to 66, but leaving the.
He will be held at that 66. If he wants to go below that, that would require coming back in front of the Planning Commission. But the minimum he can do is 66 for each lot.
Based on this variant. So
Yes.
basically it'll be the link. So he'll be at somewhere at 2,000 square foot anyway. Correct?
Yeah, a little bit less than half an acre,
No.
on these lots.
Yeah, no bearing on my motion or my approval and how I feel about it. I do want to take an opportunity to thank Brandon for his energy in pioneering rebuilding of East Brainerd, taking care of his neighbors. I'm familiar with his story. I'm familiar, obviously, with the area that we are talking about, and I applaud you, Brandon, for stepping up and being willing to put your heart and soul into the rebuilding of East Brainerd, especially after the tornado. So I'm seeing this all over District 4 in the tornado area, and it's very important. And if we're looking for a hardship to apply to this case, I would say, well, it was an Easter tornado. That's one of the biggest hardships that I can think of. So Brandon, I applaud your effort, and I appreciate what you're doing for your neighbors and looking out for your corner of East Brainerd. And you have my full support, and I move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Hearing a second from Councilman Ledford, or hearing a motion from Councilman Ledford, a second from Mr. Farmer. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye through roll call, please.
Ledford,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Barone. Guys, he said yes, this would come through. Bailey,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you, John. Case variance SD 2021-0005, 12335 and 12339 Waters Edge Lane, a variance for minimum lot size on private road in Hamilton County, has a staff recommendation to approve. I do not see any opposition. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct, Todd. But I did speak to one individual last week who would like to say he was on record in opposition, but he understood the request. Was concerned about property values going down because these are along a lake. You need larger lots along the lake, but was concerned about property values, but understood that just to the north of this property, a similar variance was granted by the Planning Commission back in 2013, and just wanted to be on record in opposition.
Okay, so we do have some opposition, but a staff recommendation to approve. Does anybody want to make a motion or hear the staff presentation?
Move to approve. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion.
I think that was Martin.
Motion by Commissioner
Maybe.
Martin.
Maybe is maybe.
Maybe is a second. Okay. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Okay, roll call.
Ledford,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Barone. Okay, that's a yes. Bailey?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. Next case under variances is item number 4 on the agenda, SD 2021-0006. It's for an unaddressed Aben Place, a variance for minimum lot size in Chattanooga. And I know that there is some opposition both by email and requesting to speak. So if staff will take us through that variance request, and then we'll hear from the applicant in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is case, again, subdivision case 2021-0006, the 900 block of Avon Place in North Chattanooga. The request is a minimum lot size variance to create 2 lots. The required R1 minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet. The applicant's proposing on lot A, 6,970 square feet. That's a variance of 530 square feet. And proposed lot 6B, proposing a lot size of 6,960 square feet, or a variance request of 540 square feet. Avon Place is just to the right of the screen. The property being requesting the variance is highlighted in the red circle here. They basically want to put a lot line north to south to have 2 different road frontages, one off Avon Place, and I'm sorry I forgot the name of the road to the left. But I did a quick review of some of the adjacent lot sizes. They're all over the place in this general section of North Chattanooga. You do have some that are larger than a minimum 7,500 square foot. You're looking at 23,500 to the north, 7,700 square feet to the south, and then further south about 11,000 square feet. To the west, you have 7,600 square feet, and of course a little bit larger lot to the north. So there's a wide range of lot sizes in this general vicinity. The applicant does not own property on either side so as to increase the lot size to comply with the 7,500 square foot minimum lot size. Allowing this property or granting the variance will allow this property owner to subdivide the property to provide more housing options for the city of Chattanooga. And again, staff looked at this in terms of the requested lot size variance. It's very minimal in terms of the amount being requested. Again, one lot is 540 square feet. The other one's 530 square foot is the amount of the variance being requested. So staff recommended to approve this variance request to permit this subdivision to be created to have 2 lots.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for staff? Okay, I know there is some opposition, so if you would bring in the applicant, we can allow him to speak.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to bring in Will Hastings. You should be allowed to speak now.
Mr. Hastings, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You've got 7 minutes.
Okay. Appreciate the Planning Commission hearing this variance request. And I also appreciate the planning agency staff on their motion to approve. This is a existing lot. Obviously, we're just requesting that the lot be split into 2 with a lot facing on Westwood, a lot facing on Avon Place. They both would be around 6,970 square feet. I believe there is a precedent set in the neighborhood with several subdivisions that have occurred since 1997, at least 5 that have occurred within 200 feet of the 600 feet, 200 feet of the subject property. It looks like the closest one to what we're asking to do was in February 2016. 917 and 921 Dartmouth Street was subdivided in that date. and 921 Dartmouth Street had 6,470 square feet that it ended up with. There's also precedent for lots. There's at least 10 lots in North Shore Heights, which is on Carrington Way, which is 1,100, probably 1,100 feet radius of the subject. It is 10 lots are less than 6,922 square feet. That's less than a quarter of a mile away from the property. Also, the lots along Westwood, 994 through 1,008 Westwood, since 1923, those lots have all been split off. There's Knickerbocker and Westwood. You have a subdivision all along that street, Westwood and Knickerbocker, to subdivide all those lots in the same way that we're wanting to subdivide our lot. The most recent obvious subdivision of a lot on Avon Place is the 1,000 Avon Place to the south of us. Yes, right there. That's the most recent subdivision that occurred in March of 2020. So we would love the Planning Commission to look at this and provide us a variance to lower the square footage requirement for the R1 zoning.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the applicant?
I have one, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Farmer.
Mr. Hastings, as we've heard a bunch of these requests over the past year or so, a lot of the neighborhood has talked about issues with runoff and those kind of things. Can you just address, if you wouldn't mind for just a second, if we do grant this request, how you'll handle building and runoff and make sure that you're within compliance?
Sure. I think the lot to the south, when it was re-subdivided, the 1,000 Avon Place, there was a 5-foot runoff or drainage easement around those two lots. We would do the same thing or adhere to the same requirements that was put in, I guess, into effect on 1,000 Avon Place to contain water runoff. So we would enforce that on ourselves.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, Ms. Wood, if you'll bring in, my list has 3. If you want to go ahead and bring in the first opposition.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'm going to bring in Matt Phillips. Matt, you should be allowed to speak now.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Phillips, we've got you. I just want to, the opposition has 9 minutes and there's 3 of you. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So maybe you could allow them some extra time. We do have 2 more, but go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Phillips. My wife, Tiffany, and our 3 children live at 903 Avon Place. First of all, thank you, commission members, for allowing us to voice our opposition to the applicant variance request. I hope each of you are given a copy of the letter submitted by the Avon Place Neighborhood Group. If you were, you would have noticed that 7 out of the 8 homeowners signed on to the letter that more thoroughly explains our reasoning for opposing the applicant's variance request. The existing lot prior to subdivision, subdivision proposed in connection with the variance was the intended lot size for this neighborhood, and it is consistent and complements the neighboring properties. By way of example, the average lot size on Avon Place is plus or minus half an acre. The subject property is plus or minus 0.32 acres. In addition, the average front setback is plus or minus 95 feet on Avon Place. Obviously, creating 2 lots that are less than the 7,500 square feet required by code will not allow for the typical setback found on our street. In addition, the practical and aesthetic issues, the variance request does not meet the requirements of the 10 code section 137207, which in essence provides that the proponent of a variance must show, one, an unnecessary hardship, which would result from a strict application of the ordinance, or two, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, and three, the hardship is not self-created. Application of the ordinance does not result in unnecessary hardship. The only hardship here is that they will not maximize profits if it remains as just one lot. The statute speaks more specifically about a peculiar difficulty as an exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific property. This was truly intended to address extraordinary shape and slope of a property, and that is not the case here. Finally, this hardship is self-created. The existing lot meets the lot size requirement, and there is no existing hardship when the ordinance is applied to this property. And I do want to note that on the 1000 Avon Place is, as is on the screen, you can see the subdivision is above the 7,500 square feet for both lots that is required by the existing code. We respectfully request that you consider the overwhelming objection from the homeowners on the street in rendering your decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Now, Mr. Chair, I'm going to bring in J. Paul Wilson.
Thank you.
You'd like to speak?
Mr. Wilson, you there?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
You're a little soft. If you could speak a little bit louder, but yeah, go ahead.
How about now?
Yes, sir. There you go.
All right, sorry about
And
that.
there's about six and a half minutes remaining, and that we have one additional individual after you to speak. So go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paul Wilson. My wife and I, Crystal, live at 907 Avon Place. I also own 909 Avon Place. When we moved to the neighborhood, that was a duplex. We have rezoned it, went through the commission rezoning and everything to get it rezoned to RTZ from a R1 that was grandfathered in and being operated as R2. We have spent, a lot of money and time to basically recreate what was a duplex into two townhouses that look as though it's one house. It's very confusing when you drive by. If you looked at it, you would think that it's a house, but it's actually two townhouses. And we spent the money to do that in order to keep current with the neighborhood, match what was here. I'm in total agreement with what Mr. Phillips had to say as far as the road frontages being similar all the way up Avon on both sides of the street. There's, in splitting this lot, we already have a water runoff issue, even though everybody's saying or have kept up with that runoff that they spoke about earlier. That's not solved our problem to this point. And they've, the city, I guess, has put in new sewer drains down at Englewood and Avon, but that's at the bottom. That's not where the problem is. That's just where the problem ends. And by creating two new houses without vegetation, because it's a wooded lot now, there's not as much runoff. Once you put two houses on there, you're going to increase the runoff, number one. These are open ditches. So the runoff does not stay in the ditches. It crosses the street. I've spent a lot of money putting in culverts, underground culverts and drains in the front of my yard in the right of way to help with this issue as far as our property goes. And I don't see how this could do anything but make our issues worse as far as water runoff.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we have about a little over 2 minutes and 50 seconds left. We got one more speaker.
Okay. I'll wrap up then, so that he has time to speak. The street itself's already narrow, and the addition of more driveways, and the traffic coming from the back street, which is Westwood, we catch all of this extra housing traffic from Westwood, comes all the way up Avon to get to Hickson Pike. So adding more properties is not a resolution. We've had the city come out to try to have speed enforcement, whether it be speed bumps and or more signage, but they're telling us our street's too short. So I think this just creates more of a problem. I'll relinquish the rest of our time so that our others can speak, but I totally agree with what Mr. Phillips has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Now I'm going to bring in Lucy Gates. Lucy?
Hear me?
Yes, ma'am. A little bit louder, maybe.
Okay, I too object to the proposed lot size variance request. I agree with everything that both Mr. Phillips and Mr. Wilson have already said. In addition, I live next door to the lot at 910 Avon Place. That's my address. The lot is already on the smaller side compared to the average property size that the other homes on our street sit on. There's never been a home on this lot. However, the lot itself, prior to the subdivision proposed variance, was the intended lot size for this immediate street and neighborhood. I would welcome a home be built on the lot that is consistent with the community standard. However, subdividing the lot as proposed by the applicant and putting 2 residences on this lot will be a visual disturbance and will devalue the existing homes on the street. And thank you for your time. That wraps it up for me.
Thank you, Ms. Gates. And I didn't ask while each opposition was in and out if there were any questions for opposition. But we can follow back up on that. Mr. Haston, if you will, you've got about 2 minutes to speak.
Yeah.
I do have questions, Chairman.
Did you want me to speak now?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Haston. We'll save questions unless there are any important ones, but you got about 2 minutes to respond.
Okay. As far as the last comment that Ms. Gates asked of us or made comment on, as far as devaluing, so my day job and along with my other 2 partners, we have about 75 years of experience in appraisal, real estate appraisal experience. We are not in any way, form, or fashion with the homes that are going to be placed on these lots going to be devalued or devalue the area, the area of Avon Place. We take great care in all of our renovations, home construction projects. We are very aware and want to take great care and be great stewards of our projects. We've all lived on Duane Road. All 3 partners have. I think we've lived over there for 15 years. None of us live there now. We have 2 of the partners live in North Chattanooga. But we do have deep roots right in this area. We will do nothing to devalue property values with this variance request. As far as the runoff is concerned, there will at least be 1 house placed on this property. And so I do believe that with 2, there's not going to be, with landscaping, drainage easements, there will not be a significant increase in runoff to appeal to Mr. Wilson's concerns. And then as far as I know, I'm getting close on time, with Mr. Phillips and I guess bringing up the hardship what he requires of the code that requires that there be a hardship placed on this property in order to approve the variance. There are 5 examples, one in particular on Dartmouth that I mentioned, that do this exact same thing, split off a property, and it was approved by the Planning Commission. That 5 of them were, one being at 1002 Westwood, the one that was a 7,500 square foot on Mr. Schultz's view of the parcels, the 7695. It was subdivided in.
Mr. Hasten, if we could wrap up, please.
Yeah, that's all I've got. I would appreciate Planning Commission's help in looking at this and providing us approval to move forward.
Thank you, sir. And I didn't ask. I'm assuming, Emily, we can bring opposition back in if anybody has a particular question for those individuals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If there are any questions for the applicant or opposition?
I do, Chairman.
Yes, Councilman Ledford.
If we could bring back in Mr. Wilson and Ms. Gates, I have 2 questions, and Brian, you might have to help me. I'm glad you got the map up. So my question would be, while you're bringing them back in, are they still on the line?
Yes, I just moved them into the meeting.
Okay. So at 907 and 909, did I understand correctly that was a duplex and now a single family home?
Yes, they are 2
Okay.
townhomes, RTZ.
Okay. Now, am I seeing on that piece of property 2 driveways?
Yes,
Do they still exist?
they do.
Okay. And the same question goes for Ms. Gates. If she's at where it says 23,500, does that does that property face or have access, egress and ingress to both sides of the property?
Yes, the property faces
Okay.
Avon Place, but the drive-through cuts back all the way to
Okay.
Westwood.
Okay. All right. That was my question. I appreciate you answering that, because I'm seeing a lot of people, or I'm seeing 2 people with a lot of extra driveways, and I'm just that answered my question. The square foot variance is 530 square feet is what's being asked for. That's really all the questions that I had. I appreciate it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from planning commissioners?
I have a quick one. Mr. Schultz, what's the minimum square footage for RTZ?
Well, prior to, I guess, last year, there was no minimum lot size. It was based on number of units per acre, and in urban overlay, it was 12. We amended that back in the summer. I think
Right.
it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, 3,200 square feet.
I would have to double check.
Yeah,
I can
it's-
pull that amendment if you'd like.
Less than, but you feel
It's less than
safe saying-
7,500. It's less than 7,500 square feet.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Farmer. Other questions from planning commissioners?
I have one question, Mr. Chair, for staff. If the variance wasn't for the lot size, say the original lot was large enough to create 2 lots that met the minimum size requirements, would they be able to split this lot by right, as a clarification?
Yes, they would. As long as it met the lot size and sewer was available to both lots, it meets all the requirements, and we'd have no choice but to approve as staff.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve. I think the staff request is right on. This is a small variance, and there is certainly precedent in the neighborhood. So I'd move to approve the staff's recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a motion from Commissioner Farmer, a second by Commissioner Coker. Any to approve? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Ledford,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Barone. Okay, Bailey,
Yes.
Payne.
Yep.
Martin,
Yes, sir.
And I just know for the record, Commissioner Varone noted through his comment, he said yes, so it's unanimous approval.
Motion to approve passes. Thank you. I did not mention earlier that we have one case that has been withdrawn. So I apologize if there's individuals on the line that were waiting on this case, but let me go ahead and mention it now. Case number, it's number 3 under new business, but it's case number 2021-0019, which is located at 1614 Kirby Avenue in the city of Chattanooga. It was to rezone from R1 to C5 neighborhood commercial zone. There was quite a bit of opposition. No one registered to speak, but there was quite a bit of opposition that we received on that case. So I apologize for not mentioning that initially, but that case, that applicant did withdraw it appropriately, and so we will not hear that case. So thank you. Coming back to our last variance, item number 5, which is case number SD 2021-0007. It's located at 521 Unicorn Trail. It's a minimum lot size variance on a private road. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition?
There is not, Mr. Chair.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Who said the motion?
Commissioner Ledford.
Commissioner Ledford. Was there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coker. Okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Varone.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on under our agenda to new business. We'll start with case 2021-0017. It's located at 7210 Snow Hill Road in the Hamilton County. It's a application to rezone from A1 agricultural district to R1 single family residential. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition?
There is not, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, 2021-18 also goes with this case. I don't think we have any opposition, but the applicant has submitted some revised conditions they may want to speak to when we get to that point.
Okay, so the initial one that's currently under consideration is to rezone from A1 to R1, which is case 17. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Councilman Ledford. Is there a second?
Is that Commissioner Farmer?
Second.
Or maybe.
Commissioner Maybe. Okay, any discussion on the motion? I'm assuming we can hear if there are issues with conditions, we'll hear the staff presentation prior to discussing conditions. I'm assuming it's the same staff recommendation either case, correct, Mr. Schultz?
Yes, 21-17 is approved. 2021-18 is approved with conditions.
Okay.
We have 2 conditions. The applicant wants to tweak those.
Okay.
But I do see that Chris Maybe has raised his hand.
Oh, well, I was going to go ahead and, Mr. Maybe.
If I did, it was by mistake. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get through the motion for A1 to R1. We do have a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye through roll call.
Ledford.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Varone. He says yes there. Bailey.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes, Chair.
Thank you, John. Brian, if you would, why don't you go through case 2021-0018, the 7210 Snow Hill Road, the special permit for residential plan unit development. Why don't you go through that with the conditions, and
Okay.
then we'll bring in the applicant.
Okay, yeah, this is the second part of this request. This is for a special exceptions permit for a PUD. Total acres is about 46.4 acres. Proposed number of units is 137. And that equals a density of 2.95. This is the PUD plan that was submitted by the applicant. You see one entrance off Snow Hill Road with typical lots. To the rear, this dash line is the floodway. So the applicant's staying out that floodway and shifting everything to the left of the floodway. There's a clubhouse, but this is primarily a single family development. This is in the Wolf River Creek area plan, which was adopted in 2007. The proposal is compatible with adopted plan and adjacent land uses, which are all single family. However, the Wolf River Creek plan for this particular area is very, very low intensity development. As part of that plan, it said that densities in excess of 2 dwelling units per acre should only be considered if the development will preserve substantial areas of open space. So staff looked at this goal or policy in the plan and came up with 2 conditions. Approve the request subject to a 25-foot landscape buffer being provided for the entire lot frontage along Snow Hill Road, with the exception of a curb cut for ingress and egress. And number 2, a 10-foot landscape buffer shall be provided for the entire length of the northern and southern property lines. Let me go back. So what we're saying is along this northern and southern property lines, because the density is greater than 2.95 dwelling units per acre, provide a landscape buffer, which is not required in the landscape ordinance, and also do a 25-foot landscape buffer along Snow Hill Road, with the exception of the road being cut in. So that's the staff recommendation, but I do believe we received some revised conditions from the applicant. I'll let the applicant speak to those conditions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, Emily, if you'll bring in the applicant.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm bringing in Mike Price and Derek Blackwood from MAP.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission?
Yes, Mr. Price, we've got you. You've got 7 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I'll try not to use those. So thank you for letting us kind of expound a little bit upon these conditions. First off, we don't have any objection to the landscaping along the northern and southern boundaries. However, the 10-foot landscape buffer is not defined. I don't know if staff was inferring a type C or whatever, but what we thought would be appropriate would be the planting of trees at 25 feet on center versus a type C, which is evergreens at 10 feet on center. We don't think creating a hedgerow along the northern and southern boundaries of the property is appropriate. We recognize that planting some trees along in through here does make sense, but not at a typical spacing of a type C buffer. So we would just simply state that the northern and southern boundaries would be planted at class 1 trees at 25 feet on center approximately. The other condition that was referenced was a 25-foot landscape buffer along Snow Hill Road. Same thing, there's no description of exactly what that means. Does that mean 2 shrubs? Does that mean 22 trees? So what we would simply state there is, again, that we would go with a 10-foot type landscape buffer with trees, class 1 at 25 feet on center along Snow Hill Road. Now, I would point out that we have a 50-foot gas easement that goes through the property. And in those areas where it crosses the exterior boundary, we will not be able to plant any landscaping of any sort in that buffer, or excuse me, that easement area. So that would be the one exclusion from that. The only other condition that we would just add is that the minimum lot width along the PUD perimeter would be a minimum width of a 50-foot wide lots. We recognize we might go smaller or narrow widths on the interior, but the exterior would be 50 feet minimum. So basically it's changing the conditions that staff has with regards to landscaping and adding another self-imposed condition around the perimeter of the property, and that's basically it.
Thank you, Mr. Price. So were you defining the landscape buffer there along Snow Hill Road to match what you recommended for the northern and southern, the 10-foot, 25 center to center?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So those two redefinitions of the buffer, and then also 50-foot minimum lot width along the perimeter. Was that a condition we had requested, Brian, or is that one that they're?
The 50-foot is one the applicant's requesting. We did not have that condition. We just had the landscaping.
Okay. So that request, Mr. Price, would be that everything around the exterior would be 50-foot minimum, but you could change the lot width on the interior, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Maybe's virtual hand is raised. I don't know if he wanted to ask a question.
Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but please just disregard that hand.
Okay. Anybody, any other commissioner questions for the applicant or staff?
Mr. Chairman, this is in the county, so I'd probably defer to your judgment, but one of the issues that the commission knows that I have concerns about, I think is apparent on Snow Hill Road. I am concerned that over a period of time, and this will come to affect the city as you approach the city boundary to the south, we're creating developments that have one way in and one way out, such that we're missing the opportunity for secondary routes that can really help people. At the very least, there are all kinds of complicated issues with that I think future generations are going to suffer for. But at the very least, we are building developments that are requiring that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have no choice other than to use Snow Hill Road. And like I said, this is in the county, so I probably would defer to your judgment and normally would go along with staff recommendation. I may do that here, although I am very concerned that we're not even referencing I believe there's a item, I wrote it down, but I'm not looking at it. I think it's 401.15, maybe it's similar to the subdivision regs in the city that suggests that some feasible extension of streets should be planned, and that's not happening with this. And I think that's a problem. If there are extenuating circumstances such as developed land or creeks, which there are clearly on the east in this case, but they're not on the north or the south, it seems to me that the plan, especially considering it's a PUD, should enable some sort of future connection north or south. So that does concern me. And I felt like I needed to make that comment.
Mr. Bailey, no, thank you for the comment. Just relative to Snow Hill Road, we did go through a safety audit with TDOT on Snow Hill Road. I will tell you that a development I believe just south of here does have multiple entrances, and we did require some additional roadway improvements relative to those access, which I thought initially may have been where you were going. This one's limited with frontage on Snow Hill Road, so I'm not sure if that's why staff didn't make a comment. There may be a comment.
Well,
we did note it.
Mr. Chairman, we did note that in the staff report. I was going to say that. We did note in the staff report under one of the sections in the staff review, we did note that the developer should explore options of connecting to the north and south, but not a condition. We did note it. And
just for everybody's benefit, I know staff individually has talked about that, and so we may want to request that either through a condition before it gets to before county commissioner, or maybe just with a permitting. But to your point, Mr. Bailey, I do agree with a little bit relative to connectivity. We do have a 200 lot maximum, which the International Fire Code requires. So we do have some codes in place for over 200. But I would agree with you. That would be a nice to either have a future connection to the north or the south.
And when staff did review this, like I say, we did note in the staff report, and we did discuss those connections at staff review zone, because you have a very large tract of land sitting to the north of this property, as Mr. Bailey just pointed out. And you do have this development to the south that could be developed in the future, but we did not require it as a condition.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions for staff or the applicant? Or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to approve with the recommendation from the applicant on the conditional changes.
Okay, I have a motion to approve with the revised conditions by Councilman Ledford. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Maybe. I have a motion to approve any with the revised conditions. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Roll call, Mr. Bridger.
Ledford,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Jerome,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Payne,
Yep.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. As mentioned before, item number 3 has been withdrawn. So we'll move on to item number 4, which is case 2021-0020, which is located at 9012, 9016, 9018, 9032 Rado Road in Hamilton County. It's an application to rezone from A1 Agricultural District to R3 Multifamily Residential District. Has a staff recommendation to deny. Mr. Schultz, if you'll take us through staff recommendation.
Sure, and actually case 2021-0021 is also a case that goes with this same property. So do you want me to hit both of them at the same time? Or do you want to break them up separately? One's a rezoning, then the second one's a PUD.
We'll hear both of these. I'm assuming that if the first one, go ahead and give us everything you need to
Okay.
on the rezoning.
Okay, this is case 2021-20, request rezone from A1 Agriculture District to R3 Multifamily Residential for proposed use of garden home residential. Again, we're not looking at a proposed project, looking at a zone. This has about 22 acres in size. Proposed units is 170, and that equals a density of 7.48. It's located at 9012, 9016, 9018, and 9032 Rado Road, just west of I-75 along Ooltewah Georgetown Road. This is Bellow Woods subdivision, Cambridge Square, so it's just north of Cambridge Square. Here's a closer view of that property. Here's Bellow Ridge subdivision. This is I never remember the name of the subdivision, but it's a subdivision sitting here on septic tanks. Then to the west is this industrial park off I-75. Here's a view of Rado Road. Site's just on the left-hand side. Site's on the right-hand side. This is a view looking north along Ooltewah Georgetown Road. Site is on the right-hand side of the screen. Another aerial view of the site itself. Here's Rado Road, Ooltewah Georgetown Road. And of course, this is the site itself. It's currently zoned A1. To the north is A1. To the northeast is R1 residential. This is Bellow Ridge subdivision. To the west is A1. Then, of course, once you go further west across I-75, you have M2 and C2. To the south is A1. And to the southwest is R1 PUD that was never developed, sitting there vacant today. So you can see there's no R3 zoning in this general vicinity. It's pretty much all low density residential being A1. You do have a pocket of R1 subdivision sitting here to the northeast. There's been no recent zoning history on this particular piece of property. This property is zoned R1, was rezoned in 2004 to R1 with a density of 2.9 dwelling units per acre. This particular piece of property is large, vacant tract of land. It does have a couple single family dwellings on the property, but adjacent uses are single family detached to the west. To the south is single family detached, and the north is single family detached residential. And to the east is vacant land and single family detached. There's no floodplains or steep slopes on the property. This property is located in one of our most recent land use plans or area plans, which is the White Oak Mountain Area 12 area plan, which is adopted in 2019 by the Planning Commission. The place type for this particular piece of property is suburban residential. And that's defined as being low to moderate intensity of 3 to 5 dwelling units per acre. Suburban residential is typically created through the subdivision process and consists primarily of single-family detached housing. There may be opportunities for duplexes and attached housing and ADUs and townhomes if the density is compatible. But again, the predominant use is single-family detached residential. Staff recommends to deny this request. The proposal is not compatible with the newly adopted Area 12 plan. The plan recommends single-family residential as the primary use for this area. Again, exceptions can be made for 2-unit attached housing if the density of 3 to 5 units is maintained. The proposal of 7.49 dwelling units an acre is not compatible with adjacent densities, which are 2.9 and below. So staff recommends to deny. This proposal will also introduce a new development form into a primarily rural and suburban single-family residential area. There are no other R3 zones nearby, so approving R3 at this location would set the precedent for future requests. And approving this request would also be a major deviation from the newly adopted land use plan. The land use plan, again, recommended suburban residential place type for this particular site. The Area 12 plan did mention mixed residential place types, and it would encourage this type of development at those locations. And I have on the screen where those locations would be. One of those would be along Ottawa-Georgetown Road on Lee Highway near Cambridge Square, just north of Cambridge Square, further south of this site. You can see I've highlighted the site here. So the plan recommends a mixed residential or R3 zoning just further south. Old Cleveland Pike is another location of mixed residential. Then further south at East Brainerd Road near East Hamilton High School is another pocket of mixed residential. So staff really likes the concept and the proposal, just not this location. There's other locations in the plan where this particular project would be suitable. So staff recommends to deny the rezoning request for R3 at this site based on those factors.
Mr. Schultz, if you would, I've got on my list, I've got about 3 individuals that sent in opposition. I'm assuming emails or sent in. Can you go through those briefly? I'm assuming they have as much to do with the rezoning to R3 as they do with the PUD. So can you highlight those? I know we don't have anybody registered to speak, but if you could highlight that opposition before we go to the. Okay.
I don't know if Emily, do you have those in front of you, Emily?
Yes.
Emily has, she was the one who put that spreadsheet together. I'll let her go through those.
There were 3 comments submitted from 3 people: Kathy, Gomilla, Angela Borges, and Carrie Jones. And their concerns were with traffic, the number of units, stormwater runoff, sewer capacity, and R3 zoning, setting a precedent in the area.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions from the Planning Commission to staff? Okay, seeing none, Emily, if you bring in the applicant, please.
Yes, I'll be bringing Mike Price back in.
And just as a reminder, I did not discuss case 2021-21, which is the PUD that goes with this. And that's the one that has a site plan. So I'll pull the site plan up for that. Well, it's basically the same comments.
Well, Brian, would standard protocol on that be that if it rezones, we'll move into the next case? I mean, we'll move into the next case either way. But so we're discussing A1 to R3 request. Mr. Price, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Okay, if you want to go ahead, sir.
Okay, so the request is for a R3 zone because that is the only available zone for us to be able to do a development such as this. So it was chosen out of necessity versus chosen out of preference. So the plan that was originally submitted did show 170 units to be constructed. We since have come back in and have revised that request slightly, where Brian can pull up where we have eliminated 9 units. You will see those in the blue X's. So now the request is actually for 161 units, and I'll describe here shortly why we did that. So the density now is actually now closer to 7.1, a little less as far as what the request is. So we recognize that this development will have an impact to traffic along Boulevard-Georgetown Road. And so we have proposed to dedicate the necessary right-of-way to widen out Boulevard-Georgetown Road to our side for 3 lanes, providing a left turn lane coming into the development. We have a roundabout that is constructed, proposed at the entrance that allows, in the event that somebody comes into the development and finds out that this is not really where they intended to be, that they can simply turn around inside the development, come back out, and then not be backing out onto Boulevard-Georgetown Road. Rado Drive also is a road that has a substandard right-of-way, and so we propose to dedicate at least from the center line of Rado Drive 25 feet so that it becomes more standard with regards to what the county requirements are. These communities have been popping up more lately. So basically these are single family and 2-unit apartment buildings, but they're basically all single story. I think we have some pictures that were submitted to staff. Maybe Brian, if you could pull those up. It just gives you an idea. This is the type of buildings that we are talking about constructing. Next slide. Okay, you can see again, single story through here. This is what your interiors are looking like. This is the back. So unlike apartments where you really do not have an ability to, have space behind or, out of your unit, you might have a small little deck area. These actually have spaces behind the building so that you can have, a pet that stays outside or barbecue or entertain guests. So it provides you some privacy, but also the ability to be outside. So a couple things that I would point out is that this is going with the Area 12 plan, is that this area, per the Area 12 plan, has a higher than average growth projection. And it's actually was projected at about 42.8%, which is high growth, obviously. The goal is to protect steep slopes. There are none on this site. Growth is to be should be directed to areas with sewer services, which we have, and the ability to tie in. And then there's another key component that I like to add, which is it is provide affordable housing. Well, in order to achieve affordable housing and ability for people to afford to live, you have to have more density because the land prices are the same. The cost to extend sewers to the site is the same. Landscaping and paving and parking is essentially the same. The only way that you can help achieve a more affordable housing is to increase density. And so with that, I would point out that in the staff presentation, it talks about the fact that a PUD, an R1 PUD, which staff, as I understood it, would support, is 5 density or 5 units per acre. Well, if I take 5 times the number of acres, that comes up to 113 buildings. I would just like to point out that there are 118 buildings proposed. So if you just take for the second, just the thought of 113 buildings is fine. We have 118. The difference is in terms of some of these are duplexes versus being single family. In terms of the units being used through here. So I would advocate that at the end of the day, if you take your density based upon the number of buildings, we're within 5 of even what staff would allow based upon the density of an R1 PUD. If they were all single family, we could do 113 buildings. If I had 1 duplex out of that, I could do that. So we're right there at the numbers as I would see it, just given that. So we also added a number of conditions to this, including a 40-foot building setback around the PUD perimeter, that we would not exceed 161 units, that we provided a gated entrance. We thought that that was important just for long-term showing the quality and care that's going to be committed to. provide a clubhouse and pool. The landscape buffers, which are shown on the plans, which are 30 feet that are along the properties that are R1, which is a row of evergreen trees, and then also deciduous, a 20-foot landscape buffer along Ooltewah Georgetown Road and Rado through there, and dedicating the right of way through there as well. And then, let's see, should be another one. Is that right, Brian?
I think that's it, Mike. That's all I have is 5.
All right.
Sorry, seven.
Okay. And then I also showed that one of the items that we would also propose in through here is to be limited to height no greater than 2 stories or 1.5 stories, whichever the case may be. All these are pretty much proposed to be 1 story, but there may be some 1.5 stories ultimately at the end of the day, but nothing would exceed 2 stories in height. So I think given the fact of where we are with proposed use, and again, if you look at the numbers just based upon the 5 units per acre and the number of buildings that would be constructed at 113, we're at 118 in terms of number of buildings. So I think that is keeping in regards to the density in through here. And again, trying to make affordable housing. This is how we would propose to achieve that based upon the plan that you see. We did not hold a neighborhood meeting just because, again, the time of COVID, but I would point out that we went around to the neighbors, knocked on doors. I'm not going to tell you that people were happy and excited, but by the same token, there were several that were sort of indifferent, several that were renters, some felt it was inevitable, and there were a couple that they were not happy about the development, but I think when they understood that this was not apartments in the standard sense of the word, it did alleviate their concerns, at least in that regards. So if there's any questions, be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, staff, well, can staff clarify something real quick, just on the density before we get?
Yes, Brian.
Again, we're counting units and not buildings. Just be clear.
But to that point,
well, that's okay, Mr. Price. We exceeded that 7. Well, but there may be some questions related to that. So, is there any questions from staff?
Chairman, I have a question for the applicant.
Yes, sir, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Price. If this was you're requesting an R3 PUD in order to make this work for you. If that was an apartment building, what would be the height you would need to achieve that to make it work?
Like a typical apartment development?
Yeah, the one that that people talk about a lot now these days. People are not wanting apartment buildings. I'm getting that in my district all the time.
Right. You would be looking at 3 to 4 story buildings. One side might be 3 story. The other side might be 4 that would be on the downhill side, given what the topography might be allowing, but 3 stories at a minimum.
Is this product several years, 2 or 3 years ago, is this the same product in my district off of Shallowford Road?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay, I think we call it Ashford Village.
Ashford Village, yes, sir.
Okay. When we first saw this product, is that the first time this product has been introduced in our area, is in the East Brainerd area?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the first time it's actually been introduced in the Chattanooga-Hamilton County area.
Okay. Yesterday, I took some time, obviously out and about in the district, and I stopped by Ashford Village, and I just wanted to share this. I thought it was interesting. I talked with some of the residents there, and they're very non-obtrusive, number one, from the road, which I found to be extremely valuable as far as towering over. And that was something that we're seeing in the city, concerned about. But talking with the residents, they seem to really like this single family look, feel, and I just found it really interesting how it was laid out, how it was gated even with security. This is a very interesting product that meets a very high demand, and the folks were happy. There were some younger folks who rented. There was some couples, probably I won't say their ages, but that were not in their 20s. And it seemed like it was a good mix for a lot of different folks who had a lot of different needs. And I found it really interesting listening to what they had to share with me. And so I want to make sure this was the same type product. And it just feels like this is a product that's satisfying a lot of high demand for affordable housing. And my last question for you is this, you are improving infrastructure along Rado. Is that correct?
We don't show that on the plans, but I would not be surprised that Hamilton County Highway Department may require us to do some improvements down Rado Drive. Certainly at the minimum, we were providing right-of-way. I don't know what Hamilton County Highway Department, Todd may have a better idea of what may or may not be required, but we at least improve the entrance to Rado off of Boulevard Georgetown at a minimum.
Okay, and you did do that on Shallowford as well. If I believe we conditioned a decel lane, which I think is going to prove extremely helpful.
Yes, we did do that.
Okay. Chairman, I appreciate it. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Yes, Councilman. Just to clarify a little bit, if they do any type of replatting, the 25 foot off the Rado will be a requirement. It's in the subdivision reg, so they'll be required to do that. They do show some pretty substantial improvements to Ooltewah Georgetown, which would probably be required as any type of permitting. And let me ask a question. I don't have a question, I don't think, for the applicant yet, but Brian, can I ask a question relative to, and I know we're just talking about zone and rezoning relative to R3, but to Councilman Ledford's point, I'm assuming the rezoning with the conditions that they've laid out relative to units and height, would that disallow a R3, put aside the issue related to zoning an R3 in this area without any other R3 in the R3 in the area, but would the condition allow more towards the apartment complex that's closer to Lee Highway on Ooltewah Georgetown?
Those conditions the applicant read were related to the PUD, the special exceptions for the PUD.
Okay.
I don't believe there was any conditions proposed on the R3. So if the R3 was sitting there wide open, there would not be any conditions unless Planning Commission so chooses to put conditions on it.
Well, let me clarify because I think it's important to the point that Councilman Ledford was making to the applicant. So the conditions are related to the PUD, not necessarily the R3. Is that correct, Mr. Price?
I'm fine with if you want to place those conditions on the R3 or on the PUD, either way. The reason for the PUD, as much as anything, is, and we had a case in the county here recently where this was done. I don't recall this specific case, but at the end of the day, the reason that the PUD overlay occurred on an R3 was to show that the plan cannot be shifted, moved around in the event that someone sold it or purchased it later and wanted to do something different. So the PUD was for the intent to lock down a plan that gives everyone the confidence that this is what it is for today and what it's going to be 10, 20 years down the road.
Yep. And I will say staff, when we talked about this case of staff year was on, we really, as all cases, really discussed this, but we understand and really like the project. We just don't feel, based on the most recent plan, that this is the location.
Yeah.
So, we really like the plan. We're not saying we don't like it. It's just we feel there's more appropriate areas in the White Oak Mountain plan that this would be more appropriate.
It's more of a transition. So
it is.
I would agree with staff. Mr. Bridger, would you like to, I don't know if you want to speak now or speak.
Yeah, I'll just ask, and I know the commissioners are thinking about a lot, and then I think they've heard from the applicant and staff. And I just remind everybody is that, remember, it's not just about this property, but what it means for this area. So if we're approving R3 zone here, it does set, precedent for, you've got some other tracks around it. So those could go R3 as well over time. So I just ask, as you're thinking about your decision or recommendation, is that something you would want to see happen, that this area would transition to? Because that's a big area you're zoning R3. So clearly has implications for what's across the street on either side.
With the notion that the high intensity use is M2, C2 that you see on this map, which looks like it's in close proximity, is the other side of the interstate.
That's correct. Yes, it is on the other side. What
Yeah,
immediately
on the other side
abuts
of
this
Little
is
Ringgold
A1.
Road. Yeah,
No,
we're
no,
really,
I understand. Any other comments from commissioners, questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr.
if I
Farmer?
may. Yeah, I have a comment, but one mechanics question first, I guess to Brian or to John, is assuming somebody was to make a motion for approval on this, just the zoning case, could we tie that to the future approval of a PUD? So in other words, could I make a motion possibly to say we approve R3 conditioned upon being able to approve the applicant's PUD plan?
not that I'm aware of. Brian, you want?
I'm not aware of that. I think it complicates it because that PUD plan can always change.
Okay.
You could limit the number of units as shown on the PUD if you're trying to put some constraints around it.
And the height, if you want to go the height restriction as well.
But we could conditionally approve the zoning with the 7
You're on it.
with the 7 stipulations that the applicant provided. That is possible.
You could. Again, staff looked at this as a denial, so that's why there's no conditions on it. But right now,
that was my question.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's right now no conditions from staff. It was a straight denial.
I'm sure some of my other colleagues would have some things to say. I would, so I'll hold off on any motions, but I will say, I've always struggled a little bit with the plans and how we color in areas and say this is right for this area and this is not right for this area and that kind of thing. I'm very familiar with these type of developments. They are growing all over the country. They are certainly how people are choosing to live now, with some limited sewer and those type of things. This is the site that is available, and the applicant, it sounds like that he can make work. So I'm inclined to say to approve. It's a big site, and I heard Mr. Bridger saying that it would set precedent for R3, but also, I think the market can drive some of this, and not just the plan. The plan was meant to be a guideline and not a requirement. So I think this makes a lot of sense. We're going to start seeing a lot more of these type of things. What Mr. Price said about affordable housing is absolutely correct. This is one of the most expensive areas in our county for housing, and also one of the most desired areas. So to be able to have a project where we can have more of a diverse community live in and it be more affordable, I think is a huge win. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, Councilman Ledford. And then Commissioner Martin.
Just to add on to that statement, when we're talking about the next 10 years, studies have shown that the District 7 area, the District 4 city, the East Hamilton area in general will see 32% of the entire county's growth over the next 10 years. And while we attract new businesses and we work hard to provide living wage jobs and careers for folks, we're going to have to embrace the need and the desperate need for housing, and especially housing that's affordable. And I think that what Mr. Farmer said was absolutely correct. And we can't always pick and choose where that's going to be, because those parameters aren't up to us. I just want to make note that we need to be very conscious of the need for housing and this type of housing. And I've seen it in my district, and folks really like it. And even the folks that were opposed to it in my district have come to me afterwards and said, hey, that was the right call. And we appreciate your vision on that. So, Chairman, thank you very much. And Mr. Farmer, when you're ready, I will second your motion.
Commissioner Martin.
Chairman, I'm just curious. This project will be on sewer. I know we're talking about the PUD. My question is, does that affect positively other developments, other land parcels up there? I would assume they have to bring sewer to this particular parcel. And so my question is, does it have the potential to impact other land values by bringing sewer to this?
I'll let the applicant, but the wastewater, the WWTA system already comes across 75 and goes and serves Bella Ridge. It was extended to Bella Ridge subdivision probably 15 years ago. So any development along Ooltewah, Georgetown will just tie into that existing sewer. I don't know, Mr. Price, if you want to add anything. I'm not exactly, I believe the sewer is in the middle of Ooltewah, Georgetown Road right in front of this development. Is that correct?
Not actually. That's a great question, Commissioner Martin. So the sewer is some 700 feet north of us. And so, Brian, right where you got your little bit further south is about right there is where the sewer is. So the lot to the right then would have sewer access extended across their frontage. You would then come down to our property. And what it would be able to do is I'm certain we would do the plat, there'll be some easements that would want to be extended to provide sewer access to other properties. So yes, this will ultimately at the end of the day benefit other properties with providing sewer availability that they currently do not have.
Thank you, Mike. Did that answer your question, Commissioner? Okay. I'll only make a comment right now relative to permitting and ultimate developments of property. I know there's some like with all projects, there's some engineering requirements relative to this, and I'll mention it relative to sewer, although that's not what I'm talking about. You know, we talked about a development the other day that had gone through all the approvals for rezoning and PUD plan, but there wasn't sewer availability, so that's on hold. I know there's been some other ones on hold, so I only want to make the comment relative to this, and it has nothing to do with rezoning or potential projects, but I do want to make sure that everybody is aware, because we sometimes get into this where after the fact, when we have some challenges in meeting certain requirements for permits, well, we get the argument that because they've got rezoning and a PUD that allows the development, and I only want to make the comment that does not allow the development that allows it, but there are certain requirements related to permitting that have to be dealt with. And John, you want to say something?
Yeah, problem. I'd say whenever you're ready to make a motion, it sounds if Commissioner Farmer, I think you've made some good thoughts. So just make sure you note that as part of your motion. So we would include that as part of the resolution. So when we get to County Commission, we can kind of convey that to them that this is the reason behind PC's action. So just kind of, I think we got the essence of. I think you noted about the need for more affordable housing and range of housing, but just if you could note that as part of your motion, so we can forward that along.
Sure. And just to be clear, we're doing the rezoning to R3. I think we've all made clear that we're going to consider conditions on the R3. But any additional questions for staff or the applicant or a motion, I'll entertain.
If there's no other questions, I'd be happy to make a motion. Brian, you want to put the applicant's conditions up that they provided?
Sure. I think there were 7 of them. They're on 2 pages. Even though it says 5, well, actually it should be number 7. But these are the conditions that was supplied by the applicant. And again, these are related to the PUD itself. But
and
you can carry some of these over.
And I wonder, was height in there, the 2-story?
It was not. I did not get the height one. If I got that, I apologize. I did not see that in the list of conditions provided by the applicant.
I'll make a motion that we approve the applicant's request, subject to the applicant's conditions that they provided, with an additional condition of buildings to be no more than 2-story. As I said before, this is, and I'll be quick, but to me, this is a matter about how people want to live. And it's coming, and I think we should embrace it. The most important thing I think is, as we have jobs and job growth here, jobs have to go somewhere to sleep every night. And this provides very affordable housing and a very affordable option for people as our county continues to grow.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Farmer, a second from Councilman Ledford. Any additions or discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bailey. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say I'm going to vote no, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I definitely appreciate everything that Mr. Farmer and Mr. Ledford have said, and in this case, I have a hard time with a plan that is so current that we all spent so much time on yielding a recommendation that we would go against. So I'm going to support the staff recommendation just for that reason, not to again, just to acknowledge that I think the housing product and the affordability and all those comments I agree with. I just think that in this case, the plan should direct our judgment. So I'm going to vote against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I do think it's important to realize location and precedent when we make votes relative to land use. Any other questions, discussion?
Mr. Chairman, staff has
Yes.
one question, just for clarification on number one, proposed condition number one, subject. Can we change that, or plan commission change that to say 40-foot building setback, and just remove the PUD perimeter since it's tied to the zone and not necessarily the PUD at this time?
Yeah, I think that's probably has to do with the motion. I would agree to that, and then we maybe can replicate those maybe with the PUD language in the next discussion. Is that okay with you, Mr. Farmer?
It is.
I'm good.
Okay, without objection. Okay. Okay, any other discussion, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval with conditions say aye through roll call. Mr. Bridger.
Ledford.
Yes, for affordable housing.
Coker.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Bailey.
No.
Payne.
Yep.
That was a yes, right? And then Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, John. Case 2021-0021, which is the same properties, special permit, residential planned unit development, has a staff recommendation to deny. I would allow a motion with the same conditions unless a commissioner wants to discuss the PUD plan.
Move to approve with the previous 8 conditions.
Second.
Okay, hearing a motion to approve the PUD plan related to the prior rezoning case. Any questions or comments or concerns from staff? From commissioners for staff. Okay, hearing none.
Maybe this is a John question. I don't know. Do we need to carry these conditions over, John, since we have them on the zoning case, or does it
I
really
think for
matter?
we'll probably between now and commission clean that up. But I would say for now, because it's a recommendation from PC, we can keep them on both.
Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford.
Yes to affordable housing.
Coker.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Barone. Barone. I see a yes there on the comment screen. Okay, thank you. Bailey.
No.
Payne.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Chair.
Thank you, John. Okay, next case is case number 2021-0022. It's located at 1607 Central Avenue in the city of Chattanooga. It's to rezone from M1 manufacturing zone to UIX3 urban industrial mixed use 3-story zone. Has a staff recommendation to deny. the requested zone and approve a UGC, which is an urban general commercial zone. Do you want to go ahead and bring the applicant in, Brian? Do you know if they're willing to, if the staff recommendation has that been offered to them or asked of them?
I had emailed the applicant prior to the finalization of the staff report asking about UGC. I don't think the UGC was at that time acceptable to them, but you can certainly ask them if they now since had time to read that report and agree to it.
I tell you what, let's go ahead and go through the staff recommendation for deny of the form-based and the reason for the UGC, and then we'll bring the applicant in.
Okay, this is case 2021-0022, just off Central Avenue. It's rezoned from M1 to form-based code UIX3, which is urban industrial mixed use. It's about 1.2 acres in size. It's located at 1607 Central Avenue, which is highlighted on your screen here in the middle. Here's East Main to the north, Central Avenue right basically in the middle of the screen, and railroad tracks to the west. Here's a view of the site looking from East 16th Street. A view of the site from East 17th looking towards Central Avenue. This is a view south of the site. This is a view west of the site, some kind of utility structure here, and just beyond that utility structure is a railroad right-of-way and tracks. And this is a view east of the site, East 17th and Central Avenue. And this is a view of the site north along East 16th Street. It's currently zoned M1. Everything in this area is transitioning basically to UGC. If you look at the map, we do have a little bit of C2 to the north of East Main and Central, but a lot of this M1 has been slowly transitioning over to UGC. But there is still some M1 in this general vicinity. And to the west is the closest form-based code along the railroad right-of-way, and that's the urban RD2 zone. Again, as I just mentioned, there's been a history in this general area to go to more of a UGC zone by previous zoning cases dating back to 2018. We had a request to go to M1 to UGC at the corner of Central and East Main. Then 2016, we had a case to go from actually this request was to go to C3. Planning Commission recommended UGC and was approved. So you can see the general trend here in this general area is to go to UGC. There's no UIX or any other form-based cone in this zone, this general vicinity. This is a former industrial building. It's vacant now. To the north is industrial and commercial uses. To the east is industrial. To the south is industrial uses, and to the west is railroad uses. Then once you go further west across the railroad tracks, you do get into the single-family detached form-based code boundary. There are no steep slopes or floodplains on this property. This property is located in the downtown plan, which was adopted in 2006, but that plan does not really give any specific land use recommendations for this property. And the historic River to Ridge plan, which is just adopted in 2020, just stops right outside this property. Form-based code does have provisions for expansions. There's two types of expansions. You have one for abutting properties and one for non-abutting. This is non-abutting property, so that's what we looked at as a staff. And it has three criteria. The property is in close proximity to the form-based code boundary. The property to the west of the site on Madison Avenue across the railroad tracks is about 230 feet to the west from this site. And that doesn't really mean what's close proximity. The form-based code doesn't really identify what that is. Again, you do have form-based code, but it's 234 feet to the west of the site. Second component we look at is the physical character of the property. Is it consistent with the overall character of the nearest form-based code context? Well, that again is to the left or to the west of this area, which is primarily residential. So the physical character of this property is not consistent with the overall character of the nearest form-based code context area. Again, that's urban residential detached, which allows for single-family residential uses. There's no property located in the urban industrial mixed-use context or any other form-based code on the eastern side of the railroad tracks towards Central Avenue. The property is included in the downtown plan. Well, this property is included in the downtown plan. That plan doesn't really provide any guidance for this particular area. It does provide guidance for Jefferson Heights, which is primarily single-family residential. So staff looked at this. Staff recommended to deny the applicant's request to keep form-based code to the west of the railroad tracks. We felt that UGC would be a more appropriate zone because this area in the past has transitioned from more of a manufacturing to UGC. So staff recommends to deny the form-based code UIX3 and recommend UGC for this request with no conditions. Here's the general site plan that was submitted with it. It was very difficult on the site plan to determine what the actual intent or proposed uses were for this particular project. Maybe the applicant can speak more to that. Again, we're not approving a project, we're approving a zone, or the planning commission is, sorry.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for staff? Okay, Emily, if you'll bring in
Joseph Ingram.
Mr. Ingram, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Todd?
Yes, sir. Go ahead. You've got 7 minutes.
I'll be real quick. This we're just trying to maximize what we can do with the property. This did get, Brian's got it. It's kind of caught in the no man's land. The River Ridge is across Central Avenue. Form-based code is across the railroad tracks, and this kind of sits there in this kind of hybrid area that's not really in any of the recommendations. The biggest problem here is maybe why the manufacturing zone is still up on Slayton Avenue towards Central, and a lot of those buildings is because this is server farms. These are all this is the backbone of the fiber line right there. So these are server farms.
Mr. Ingram, I could have asked you, and maybe that it's a no, and that's why we need more discussion. But just to be clear, does UGC not work?
It doesn't give us. We'd have to get a variance if somebody came in and wanted to do a server farm in one of these spaces in the UGC code, and you were kind of jammed up in the industrial code. We couldn't do any residential on the front, and the UGC we could do that, but we couldn't do the industrial uses, and the UIX seemed like the best fit. And we're kind of going with your recommendation. We don't want to get into this is not a live or die kind of thing. It was just, we're trying to maximize what the tenants could be. So you have some of these spaces that could theoretically be somebody that's in the server business, because that's what everything out there is. That stuff across the street and all that, that's all tied to the fiber spine out there. DC blocks and that, those are server farms. I mean, so this is all tied to that. And so we wanted to be able to do that. We wanted to be able to maybe on the front on Central, because all the residential's coming. And we're caught in that no man's land where we're not in the River to Ridge. We're not in the form-based code. So we put something out there, but UGC for us is a tough fit without some variances. And UGC has some landscape things that go with it and frontage that would probably overcomplicate where we're at. And I'm not sure we would move ahead with UGC.
Chairman, question.
Councilman Ledford.
Is that a PC or a BOZA variance that would be needed?
Is that for Mr. Ingram? Do you know which variant?
That would be BOZA.
Yeah,
it's not a PC variance.
I've got a question. And so you mentioned the applicant mentioned it was the server farm use was the primary uncertainty.
I'm sorry, John. No, that would be a potential use. There's been, like I said, you see the DC block next to us and all that across the street. You see those big generators out there and that. I mean, so we're so now you got some of the big players with Sprint and all that, and then this gives an opportunity for some smaller players. But at the same time, this property could go, it could be craft beer and office. I mean, they're just the owner's just trying to maximize his opportunity to lease the space. And so in the UGC, you would be another step if somebody came in and wanted to do something related to servers. And so it just wasn't a great fit. Whereas the M1 didn't allow any kind of residential. So that was, we're trying to find something that maximizes his opportunity there.
Mr. Chairman, it's the same line of questioning. maybe I'm asking the same question, but is a server farm prohibited in UGC? And that's the reason that, Mr. Ingram, you're pursuing form-based code?
That would be our understanding. Maybe John could clear that up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm not, I would like to, well, I know maybe y'all need to just make your recommendation, but regardless of what happens today, I will find out from LDO. I would think that would be as a utility or office would be allowed in UGC, but I would want to talk to LDO to make sure that's the case.
Let me know, John, because I'm thinking that it's not in there.
We were thinking it was not, but yeah, I could have read the code wrong. We thought it was a manufacturing. That's why the other tracks have stayed manufacturing.
Okay. So what we're saying is a server farm is allowed in a U1X3 zone under the form-based code, but not in UGC. I'm assuming, is that correct, Brian or John?
I think that's what
John, you're going to check.
John's going to check, but again,
Yeah, I'm like with Randy right now.
Again, at the end of the day, we're not looking. We as staff, we don't look at the project.
Understood. Understood. I'm just trying to figure out what works. Okay. Mr.
Do
Palmer, do you have a question?
Do we have time, Mr. Ingram, have time to defer this in order to clarify it, or is this a detrimental time frame?
So in full disclosure, this property did get a BOZA parking variance. So it can march ahead, and then maybe we could defer and see, because we would like to expand our opportunities. So I would love to see what works best out there. But the parking variance let the project move ahead that went through BOZA last month. These two kind of came through together, and the zoning was turned in ahead of the BOZA decision. So we could work with that. We could defer 30 days. Everybody knows the answer. Either we withdraw or we try to move ahead with the UI, the form-based code.
That's again, I was going to staff reiterate again. If it's like we just discussed a few minutes ago, if you open up the door for form-based code on this side of Central Avenue or the railroad tracks, you set the precedent for future requests in this general area. Think about future projects.
Yeah, and let me only say this. I don't think, from what you're saying, Brian, and I would agree with that the staff recommendation doesn't change to, or at least what you're saying, Brian, I'm assuming even if it's deferred 30 days, we would know what potentially would be allowed in UGC, but it doesn't sound like to me the form-based code that staff would still recommend to deny the extension of the form-based code.
As John feels different, I don't think anything changes from staff's point of view to change our recommendation.
No, I do it at this edition, though, just looking, I had to pull up the regs. All telecommunication facilities are allowed by special permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So it would be a BZA. Okay. Thank you, John. Any other questions for staff or the applicant from commissioners?
I'll make a motion when ready.
That may be now, Councilman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move for staff's recommendation for UGC on case number 0022.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion for UGC, Councilman Ledford, seconded by Mr. Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Seeing
Mr.
none.
Chairman, I guess I have a quick question.
Mr. Maybe.
And I'm inclined to vote with the councilman's motion there, but I guess I'd like to verify with the applicant, if possible, that they would prefer to have the UGC rezoning as opposed to no rezoning at all.
Fair enough question.
Good question, Mr. Maybe, and we would withdraw as opposed to have UGC.
Then I would like to rescind my motion, and that was a great question, and move to defer 1 month.
I think if everybody thinks it's UGC, we'd be happy to withdraw. I don't want to get into
have a motion to withdraw. Councilman Ledford, is there a second?
Second.
And that's a motion to withdraw, not defer, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion to withdraw? Are we right, John?
Mr. Chairman, since I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you had on the first, which was to approve UGC, you had a motion and do we have a second?
We did have a second and then.
But no action was taken on that. No vote was taken. So I think that motion still stands. We got to clear that up, I believe.
I rescinded that motion.
Oh, did you? Okay. I missed that.
And then made a motion to defer. And then a very pointed question was made, and I'll rescind that motion. And now we're at move to withdraw.
Got you.
And that was a request from the applicant, correct? He would rather withdraw than you get UGC. So we meet that requirement, correct? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I have a motion to withdraw based on the comment from the applicant. Any discussion on that?
Second.
And yeah, Mr. Coker seconded that motion. Councilman Ledford made the motion. All those in favor say aye through roll call.
Ledford?
Yes.
Coker?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
I recuse.
Okay. Bailey? I think
Yes.
Barone has left me. Payne
Yes.
and Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, John. Next item, number 7, is case number 2021-0023. It's located at 6100 block of Highway 58 in the city of Chattanooga. It's a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to C2 convenience commercial zone. Staff recommendation to deny. Mr. Schultz, Brian, if you'll take us through staff recommendation.
Okay. This is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to C2. This property is located in the city, just on the city-county limit lines. Everything to the left or west of this line is in the county. If you follow this line all the way down, everything to the east or the right of that line is in the city. Proposed use is an RV self-storage lot. It's a little less than an acre in size, the request. Located in the 6900 block of Highway 58 in Harvest Run Road. Here's the particular site in question. It's currently zoned R1 to the east along Highway 58 is C2, everything to the west. This site's R1, and then to the south is R1 and C2, and then strictly to the north is R1. But this piece of property has a split zoning designation. And there's a reason for that. This property was rezoned back when it was in the county by resolution number 108835 to rezone this property to C2, but leave this weird little pie-shaped property R1 to serve as a buffer between this residential property to the west and the proposed C2 along Highway 58. So that was done that way by reason as a buffer. And then 2012, this property was annexed into the city limits of Chattanooga, and those zones just carried over as they were, which is R1 and C2. Again, it's currently vacant right now. It's wooded. To the west, a single-family detached subdivision. To the southwest, a single-family detached. And of course, along Highway 58 are commercial uses and a church. There are no floodplains. It does have some steep slopes on this property. It slopes up as you move away from Highway 58 into this subdivision. You have more steeper slopes right through here. There is no land use plan for this particular piece of property, but it does fall within the comp plan, which is adopted in 2016. And that comp plan was based on intensity levels, which is intensity level 4 and 1. Level 4 describes development potential appropriate for medium to high intensity development based on access to infrastructure, and that would have been along Highway 58. Level 1 is least potential for development or future public services and facilities. They have the high potential for protecting large natural areas, and that would have been primarily along the R1 or steep slopes of this property. Staff recommends to deny this request. The proposal is compatible with adjacent land uses along Highway 58, but once you get further away from Highway 58, you get into some nuisance concerns with the residential uses to the west. So staff recommends to deny the request, but keep the R1 zone as a buffer as it was originally intended when the property was rezoned to C2 to limit any type of nuisances on those adjacent residential uses to the west. So staff recommends to deny. And here's the site plan that was submitted by the applicant, just showing think this dash line here is the R1, and they're needing it for more parking for RVs. So those will be parked a little bit closer to the homes. Here's a home. You can see it's, I think, 330 feet to the nearest parking lot where the RVs will be. And this green, as he's showing on the site plan, is a buffer area. But all this is currently zoned R1.
Hey, Brian, let me ask a question just because I know, so I know. What's the zoning requirement for buffer depth C2 adjacent to R1?
I think it's type C. Or is that B, John? I can never remember that offhand.
B,
which is 20 foot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, Brian,
Yes.
no, go back to that picture there just a second.
This one?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that like a really large hill that'll have to be removed?
Yes, it does slope up once you leave from Highway 58. I think it's about through here. It really starts going up slope a little bit. So most of that will be cleared through here. The only buffer that really would remain will be this little 25 foot. I think it's 55 he's showing here. Then it narrows down to real small, like 25 feet, and it opens back up to 55 foot buffer. And I believe that was the reason way back when the R1 zone was left there to serve as a buffer. If this C2 in the front was ever developed, you would have that R1 buffer to the rear to protect these homes to the west.
Well,
you're correct.
And maybe this is a question more for our chairman as the county engineer, is how does the county look at things like that, Mr. Lehman, when it comes to water runoff, when you're totally changing the topography? That has to impact the neighborhood in a big way.
Well, there are, and let me only say this is in the city of Chattanooga, although the county's right behind it. But there are subdivision regulations and stormwater regulations both in the county and the city for quantity control. And so when you and it requires a licensed engineer to look at a site, and when you take a wooded lot and clear cut it and put impervious areas on there, you're required to control that additional quantity through detention ponds to attenuate the flow. So so this is a pretty schematic picture, but there would be quite a bit of engineering required work for stormwater control on any type of site like this. You got to take the pre-development conditions and relate them to what it's going to look like after the fact and deal with that through, and that's all through the permitting process after the fact.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's a good point brought by the chairman. You know, again, we see these site plans each month, but these are just really for illustration purposes only. As you see, this site plan doesn't show any detention ponds or any retention ponds either. So again, these are just really for illustration purposes on what's being intended use is.
But I would only add, Commissioner Martin, and that's a good point. There other than buffer, there may have been some other reasons why that pie shape was left as both for buffer and for maybe some concerns with clear cutting or slope development. So there might have been a couple of reasons why that was left as an R1 buffer when the initial area was C2. Any other questions for staff before we bring in the applicant? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Wood, if you want to bring in.
I'll bring in John Cunningham. It looks like he's in, but it needs to unmute his microphone.
Mr. Cunningham, yeah, there you go.
There
Mr.
we
Cunningham,
go.
can you hear us? We just heard staff recommendation to deny on the case. You've got 7 minutes. You got the floor.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just to be fully transparent, me and Mr. Biba own a small Italian restaurant in Hickson, Tennessee, and this would actually be our first time developing a storage facility. And it's not just RVs, it's actually RV and boats. And we've spent the last 2 years absorbing as much information as knowledge about this industry so we would be able to pick the right location where it met the surrounding community's needs. And that's what led us to this particular location. When we found out that R1 buffer was for a nuisance concern, we thought that that would give us a good opportunity to do RV and boat, because that type of business, there's not much traffic during the day or evening. Once people store their boats or RVs, it's not often that they're going in and out of the facility, except for when they pull it out for the use that they're using it for, whether it be weeks, months, etc. But what I believe Miss Woods was kind enough to send y'all the response that I typed up, as well as Mr. McCoy had done that drawing for us that y'all have already shown. So I appreciate y'all sending that in. But in the response that we received, I wanted to address 3 of them, if that was okay, especially with the buffer concern. In the context with the compatibility with the adjacent land uses. So we definitely understood that going into this during our due diligence, and that's why we were proposing in that drawing 20 to 55 foot. It says 50 in my response, but as you see in the drawing, it's actually 20 to 55 foot, and that's a completely planted buffer that will average 41 feet. And then based on the ordinance, we'll also have an opaque fence, which will provide additional privacy beyond the 41-foot average buffer of plants. On the next part, the context of compatibility with development form. So we felt that it was compatible with obviously the commercial on both sides, but for the housing development in that subdivision, because it would give them the ability to store their boats and RVs. During our due diligence, we also went to the closest place where you can even store your boats and RVs, and they're currently on a 3+ year wait if you even wanted to store your boat or RV there. So we knew that there was a demand for the community to want to be able to store boats and RVs there, which was more reason for us to go in, purchase this properly, and hopefully rezone it to create as much space as possible. In this drawing, it does say 316 spaces, but to make it more comfortable for people that would be renting from us, we've actually made those spaces 12 feet wide. So it's less spaces than on this drawing. It's roughly 260 spaces altogether. And on the final part, on the staff recommendation to deny, what we wanted to come across is that at no point do we want to be a nuisance to that community. And with the RV and boat storage, it's a gated community. So we have specific operating hours where people can come and go. And then at a certain time in the evening, it's locked off, even if you're somebody that rents from there for safety reasons. Also, the lighting in our facility they're like shoebox lighting, if you've seen that before. And so it's inward and down. So there's no additional lighting being pushed on that subdivision behind us by any means. And the last thing is, as we were doing this drawing, the closest house, if it was rezoned in our favor, is 110 feet away is what we came up with. But on our side of the property, we're proposing a 55-foot planted buffer beyond our opaque fence. And that doesn't include the densely planted area that homeowner already has on their property too. So there shouldn't be any issues with us imposing on his privacy from the closest home to opaque fence. I think I also, Mr. McCoy, the engineer that's been working with us on this, because I know Mr. Martin brought up concerns. We've looked at all of the water runoff, but he could speak more accurately on that. So if that's something that y'all would like to address, I would like if you wouldn't mind bringing him in. This is my first time doing this, so I'm not as knowledgeable about how that works with the water runoff. If maybe he could speak on that, if that's okay.
Sure, I can bring him in.
We've got about 3 minutes left.
Mr. Cunningham.
Did you have anything else, Mr. Cunningham? You got about 3 minutes, and Mr. McCoy may take some of that time.
I would like to give him the rest of the time, just so anything that I might have missed, maybe he could bring up, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Mr. McCoy, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. There was a question from one of the commissioners. You may have heard it, related to requirements for additional runoff when you take a undeveloped piece of property and put a RV parking on it. So if you want to start there, and there's about three minutes left.
Yeah, I did hear that. And this piece of property actually comes up to kind of a dome or a peak. And what we would be doing is coming in and cutting out the top and making it flatter than it is now. We probably would decrease the slopes by a good bit. And we would use green infrastructure and stay on volume as far as the detention's concerned, detention and water quality. So, Mr. Lehman, as you've stated, we have to make the post-development less than the pre-development. And based on what those requirements are, I don't see any problem at all with us increasing any runoff whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Brian, is there any more time left, or is that?
You got about a minute and a half.
Mr. Cunningham, just since I want to make sure you get due time, if you've got anything to close with, and then we may have some questions.
Yes. The only thing is, it seemed like in the staff's response that the biggest concern was a nuisance, and we just wanted to reassure that with this development and the amount of traffic it sees and how the property is built and the buffer we would be proposing, if allowed, we'd like to think that this would be, out of all the commercial items you could build on a property like this, the least of a nuisance, not only to the subdivision behind us, but something that they could actually use themselves to benefit them being able to keep their RVs and boats off of their personal property in the neighborhood and close to their homes, as well as the community beyond that subdivision with the demand in the area. Other than that, I appreciate you guys giving us the time to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, staff would like to clarify too. He's right. We did talk about nuisance issues, and we're looking again, at that zone, that C2. If that whole thing is zone C2, it may be an RV parking lot or boat parking lot today, but 10 years from now, it could be something else once that commercial zoning goes into place.
I appreciate that, Brian. We're looking at land use and zoning, not projects. So
Right.
Thank you for that, for reminding us of that. Any commissioners?
I do, Chairman.
Yeah, Councilman Ledford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Cunningham, are you still on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You indicated you did a lot of due diligence on this. So what did Dr. Burrs say about this case when you spoke with her?
Dr. Burrs? I'm not quite sure who Dr. Burrs is.
The City of Chattanooga District 6 representative who will make the final decision.
I spoke with Mr. Ken Smith, actually. I never spoke with Ms. Burrs.
Okay. Brian, can you clarify for me? Are we in District 3 or 6, City?
It is 6. It's Councilwoman Burrs' district.
Okay. Mr. Cunningham, I hate to tell you this, but you spoke to the wrong council rep.
That is unfortunate.
That is very unfortunate because I do not feel that she would approve of this at all, knowing Dr. Burrs for 4 years now on the council. So that's a big indicator. So I would never tell you what to do, but I will be voting no to support. I will be voting to support the staff's recommendation. I think that conversation needs to be had. I would recommend maybe considering a deferral, but you really need to contact Dr. Burrs first.
Yes, sir.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
If this project I guess the question is, could the project move forward if we deny this? I mean, it looks like 30 parking spots maybe out of and maybe I've miscounted, but is that, would you plan to move forward with this no matter how we vote? I guess is my question.
Obviously our intentions would be able to get the most out of our property, but yes, sir, if it was denied, we would still move forward with it. We just felt that, it wouldn't be a nuisance based on the reasoning it was kept R1. And we're hopeful that y'all would understand and let us create that planted buffer with that average of 41 feet so that one homeowner wouldn't be bothered by our facility, and it would give us the ability to build more on our property.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff as well, please.
Oh, you went silent, Mr. May. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for staff. So as the property is currently laid out as a split zone, if this was not rezoned as requested, would he be required to put a buffer between his own property, between the commercial and residential, even though he owns them both? And
Yes.
It's the same piece of property?
Yeah, we reached out to the landscape coordinator. The buffer is still required. The applicant can choose where that buffer goes. That can go either along the C2 portion or along the R1. It's not clear in the landscape regs, but it would be up to the applicant to choose where that buffer would go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lehman.
Yes, Commissioner Martin.
I just want to make sure that we're clear and that Mr. Cunningham is clear about what could happen here. If we vote to deny this, is it not true that they would have to wait a year about that little parcel of land, that pizza-shaped piece of land? Is that correct?
If we recommend to deny and then the city council denies, yes, Commissioner, they would have to wait a year before they could request rezoning of that pipe piece.
I believe in the city, it's 9 months.
Sorry,
Okay.
9 months.
9 months.
9 months, yeah.
So that clock doesn't tick based on what we do as a planning commission, based what on the city does.
That's
Is that
correct.
Mr. Lane?
That's correct. It's
That's
city
correct.
council action.
Okay, so to Councilman Ledford's point about Mr. Cunningham speaking to the wrong city councilman, it is possible that if we did approve this, that gives him time to talk with Dr. Burrs and the appropriate city council person. And if she's good with that, then perhaps it passes. If not, then he's got the opportunity to withdraw it and not have to sit out for 9 months. Am I correct? Is that a correct understanding, Councilman Ledford, of how things work on y'all's side of the city?
I normally wouldn't recommend approving something with a denial going forward and hoping the council rep filling them in after. That won't set well, in my personal opinion, Commissioner.
I think
I understand, and I know that Mr. Cunningham has mentioned that this is the first time he's ever done this, and I just want to make sure he understands that.
Yes, sir.
That what you're really saying is, if you really want to have a chance at doing this, do it the right way, talk to Dr. Burrs first and then come back. And that would require us deferring this for a month. Is that correct, Councilman Ledford?
You are reading me correct, Commissioner. In my humble opinion.
And I don't know of any other way for you to have an opinion than for it to be humble. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll leave that with Mr. Cunningham for him to decide what he wants to do then.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Well, let me circle us back, because to your point, Commissioner Martin, it's a recommendation. So if we recommend to deny and go with staff's recommendation, it's still a decision. City council, it can still be withdrawn or deferred through city council whether it's an approval or a denial from us, just to be clear. Or we can defer it for 30 days if that's the will of the commission.
Let me ask a question about that, Mr. Lehman. Mr. Cunningham, would it impede y'all for us to vote to defer this for a month? Would it mess up your plans? Because I think that's probably the better play.
No, to be honest, we want to do what's in the best interest of the commission. So if y'all recommend for us to defer, so I would have the time to talk to Dr. Burris, I'm 100% okay with that. I didn't realize when I was talking to Mr. Smith that was the wrong individual, and that's my fault.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that we defer this for 30 days to give a little bit more time for some due diligence that was not aware that needed to take place.
Second. You're muted, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councilman.
Yes,
Motion to defer 30 days from Commissioner Martin, seconded by Councilman Ledford. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. I will make sure Chair Collier sees that. Make sure he knows where that
where it came from,
where that deferral came from. Yes, sir. He shouldn't have been gone today.
Right.
Thank you for that discussion. Approval of that deferral. Item number 8 on our new business. Mandatory referral 2021-0025, 1300 block Spears Avenue in the city of Chattanooga. A mandatory referral for a right-of-way abandonment. Has a staff recommendation to deny. There are a couple of emails in opposition, and I do see at least one individual that would like to speak in opposition. So Brian, if you'll take us through staff recommendation.
Sure. This is case MR 2021-025, mandatory referral for abandonment of a public right-of-way. Purpose of this abandonment is to construct a new home and driveway. It's currently a 15-foot wide unopened alley. This property is in North Chattanooga. Here's Spears Avenue. This is the alleyway in question. It's unopened. It goes all the way through to Stringer's Ridge Park, but this is the only portion that's being requested to be closed and abandoned. This is a view. I think the alley is just right here. Maybe I got the wrong image a little bit, but it's really just right here beside this gravel. This gravel appears to be what was an old driveway to old home that was on this property. This is the property here seeking to build a new home. There was the gravel driveway for that home. This is a very tiny lot. You can see it's 47 feet wide by 50 foot. They're needing to abandon this portion of the alley, again, which is 15 foot wide, to construct a new home and driveway. Staff looked at this request and we felt that there were other avenues the applicant could explore for building a new home in this lot, such as applying for a BOZA, a setback, or a temporary use from CDOT for a driveway in the unopened right-of-way. There is significant interest to retain the right-of-way to provide secondary access to lots on Matlock Street, Spears Avenue, and Wirt Street, and also a possible connection to Stringer's Ridge Park. The proposal does not meet the City of Chattanooga's abandonment policy, and then the right-of-way provides potential rear alley access to several lots and could provide a connection to Stringer's Ridge Park if developed. So staff, based on that review, recommends to deny the request. Again, here's the request. You can see if this is closed, you cut off all the access to the remainder of this alley. Even though these lots on either side do have frontage on other public streets, you would cut off their access by use of that rear alley at some point in the future.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Wood, if you'll bring in the applicant.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm bringing in Darian Paris. You should be allowed to speak.
Present.
Sorry, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, well, we just went through staff recommendation on your application. You've got 7 minutes if you'd like to give us some information.
No, I'm perfectly okay with the decision. I'll just explore avenues in regards to setback variances, and I have that in the works now.
Okay, thank you, sir. I know that there was at least one person that would like to speak in opposition. So if Ms. Wood, why don't you bring him in? I'm assuming he's listening to this.
Yes.
Unless anybody wants to make a motion prior to that.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to support staff recommendation to deny.
Second.
Okay. Got a motion to deny by Commissioner Ledford, Councilman Ledford, and a second by Commissioner Coker. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, staff would like to ask, do we want to ask the applicant about withdrawing this case instead of denying it? I mean, it's just a thought.
I would be amenable to that.
Mr. Paris, does that make sense that you can just withdraw it and we don't have to go through the process to deny it and send it on the county or the city council?
No, I still would like to pursue maybe a miracle.
Mr.
Are you getting any of that?
Yeah.
I think he still wants to.
I'm not going to withdraw.
Okay. I think he still wants to go forward.
Thank you. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to deny. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Payne.
Yep.
Martin. Martin? Okay. I think, you count votes. 1, 2, 3. That's still a denial, Chair. Recommendation to deny.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Recommendation to deny. I just want to make sure that Mr. Paris and then also Mr. Caldwell, who is set up to speak. And if you could, Emily, just make sure he knows it will go on to City Council with a recommendation to deny.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, that is all of the business for today. We have an item on the agenda, public comments on non-agenda items. Does anybody have any non-agenda items? Mr. Schultz.
Mr. Chairman, I have two things to bring to Planning Commission's attention that will be coming most likely next month as amendments to the Hamilton County zoning regulations. We had a request a couple weeks ago through Todd's department in the county in the C1 zone. That's the only zone that allows hotels or lodging, which is a tourist type zone. The county has a C2 and C3 zone, which are very similar, but they're a little different in regards to some of the intensity levels. C2 specifically prohibits hotels and motels as a use. Well, we've been getting a lot of requests for lodging or for these fishing tournaments that's coming on board, I guess sometime this spring or summer. Most of the properties are going to be selling like fishing lures, fishing bait, all this stuff in retail, but they also want to provide lodging. And these are zone C3. Well, the C3 zone doesn't specifically address hotels or lodging. And the way the County Building Inspections Department interprets that, if that use is not listed as a use, then it's not allowed. So we're going to bring to the County or Planning Commission next month a resolution to amend the C3 zone to allow hotels as a permitted use. If any questions on that, I can answer that now. But it's really a straight housekeeping issue.
Just to clarify though, Brian, we're going to limit the amount of rentable rooms relative to that in a C3. So if you want to do a Holiday Inn, you've got to go C1. If you want a mixed use commercial on the bottom floor and a couple of rentable rooms on the top floor, that's allowable C3. Is that?
Well, when I did a quick look, I didn't see any places that did that, Todd. It was just a by right hotel zone, a hotel use. Because you look at your C3 zone, some of those uses, you can do assisted living by special permit. You do other noxious or heavy intense uses. I don't know why a hotel would be per se limited. We were keeping them prohibited in the C2 zone.
Okay.
That was your break.
Well, I guess y'all are doing all the research. You're going to bring it. I think the reason being for everybody is our building and zoning department had a couple of requests for lodging outside of a C1 in a different C zone. And I think what I'm hearing, Brian, or what I had heard was there wasn't a lot of staff opposition to allowing lodging in different C zones. And so
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think so. Just trying to make it clear for Todd's department, building inspections, you have a lot of retail uses, but all of a sudden hotel just was not listed.
Okay. Well, it's building and zoning. It's not mine, right. But building and zoning.
Building and zoning.
Under Public Works, but yeah, and so that's not exactly what I thought it would read, Brian. So obviously that's why you're going to bring it, and we're going to have
we'll have discussions. Well, I don't know. It may not be ready yet for March. If you want to have some more discussions on what that use is, if you want, we'll talk about it.
Okay, go ahead.
The next one we'll be bringing to you, FEMA. Every couple of years, I don't remember how many years they do this, but every few years they do an assessment of the FEMA flood regulations for the city and the county. They've done that assessment of the county regulations, and so they're proposing some amendments to make sure the regulations are up to the basic standards. So you'll see that next month is an amendment to, most of it's changing some of the definitions, just make sure they're up to date. So you'll see next month an amendment to the Hamilton County FEMA flood regulations. This happens is it 4 or 5 years, Todd? They do an assessment?
Well, let me just clarify that. We've gotten requests to allow a certain process through our FEMA regulations that we currently do not allow. The reason for that is when we did the last flood insurance rate map approval, FEMA gave us an ordinance to approve as our regulation in 2013, I believe. That regulation is more stringent now. The state adopted a new state model ordinance in 2019. And so we're going to change our resolution to mirror what FEMA allows, which allows a little bit more options relative to base flood elevations and no rise certificates. So it's not a requirement from FEMA that we do it. We are, though, matching their, it was recommended by FEMA, and so we're just going to match that current FEMA regulation. And so if there's any particular questions about that, we can talk about them now, but I did want Brian to mention it because we will deliberate it once we bring forth a resolution through Planning Commission.
I have a question. If you
Yep.
said it was more stringent, what makes it more stringent?
Well, ours currently is more stringent, and you probably will know some of these. May know some of these acronyms, but the model ordinance that FEMA actually recommended or required that we approved in 2013, which was basically their state model, did not allow any impact to the floodway that created a no rise. There is a conditional letter map revision that currently the state model has. The state changed their model or their ordinance or their recommendation in 2019. So we're going to allow that into our regulation. So actually currently our regulation is more stringent than the recommended FEMA model that the state uses. So we're gonna change ours to match that.
Gotcha.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, sir. Can you advise to me offline when the city's portion of that will be coming up next? So I'll be advised.
City's portion of
the FEMA update.
Oh, this is just the county. I don't know if the city's doing this.
Okay. Will you find out if I believe we do at some point? Can you look into that and get with me offline?
I will.
Councilman Ledford, I will tell you that we were going to hold off on this resolution, but I want to go ahead and push it forward because I do know that FEMA is coming out with new flood insurance rate maps for the county this fall. So we'll actually have to re-update it in the fall when those firms come out. I believe that's the same time it comes out for I'm not absolutely sure, but it may be the same time for the other municipalities within the county. So it may be as early as fall is my only comment.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir. So two resolutions that we'll put forward from a staff perspective, building and zoning, to change our zoning regulations next month.
Yeah.
And this
and
is
we'll say right now we got a pretty large agenda for next month as of right now. So I'm not sure either the governor's executive order expires on February 27th in regard to virtual meetings. So we're not really sure if we're still doing virtual meetings in March at this time.
Let me just ask a question. So if the governor's order goes away, we're required because of the way we're set up to actually do them back in, correct? So it will not be a choice from the Planning Commission. It'll be a directive because
the state drives it. Yeah, we have to have permission. Right now, the state law only allows virtual meetings for state committees, but not for local boards.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John.
So as he's been doing the past couple of months, he's waited till like the last minute to either extend those. So we probably won't know anything until at least the 27th.
Okay, very good. Okay, any other comments, Commissioner Martin?
Is that supposed to expire at the end of the month?
Yeah, I think Brian just said it. February.
I see the
27th. It's sort of third week. It's kind of
it's like the 27th or 28th, something like that. It's almost the end of the month.
Okay. Let me ask a dumb question. Does that include Board of Zoning appeals and beer boards? Okay.
I think so. I don't know about beer board, but I think it does get the Board of Appeals.
Okay. Okay. Any other items?
Do you want a motion to approve the minutes?
Okay.
Got a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we need a roll call for that, John?
No.
Okay.
You know, just for adjourning, you mean?
No, for minutes.
Yeah, minutes. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, so I got a motion to approve the minutes from Commissioner Farmer and who made the second?
Ledford.
Councilman Ledford, the second. So roll call.
Ledford,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Payne,
Yep.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Move to
moved.
adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John and Emily, Brian.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job,
Ready?
Good job, Tom.